All right, today I'm going to be doing a reaction video to Jacinda Ardern's recent speech in Harvard. Now, we've tried to keep it nice and short, so there's not heaps of clips of her talking, but hope you enjoy my reaction to Jacinda's speech.
I met Benazir Bhutto in Geneva in June of 2007. We both attended a conference that drew together progressive parties from around the world. 7 months later, she was assassinated. Now, there will be opinions and differing perspectives written about all of us as political leaders. Two things that history will not contest about Benazir Bhutto. She was the first Muslim female prime minister elected in an Islamic country when women in power was a rare thing. She was also the first to give birth in office. The second and only other leader to have given birth in office almost 30 years later was me.
What Jacinda Ardern was doing with her opening is comparing herself to Benazir. But they are vastly different. Benazir came up as a female in Pakistan, in an area that was completely dominated by men. Jacinda Ardern was following in the footsteps of Helen Clark, who came off a 9-year reign. Jacinda Ardern was picked specifically for her place in Parliament, so much so that she did not even have to win her electorate seat when she was first elected. She was on a party list. She was handed a spot in Parliament. They wanted her there. They got her there. Now, on a personal note, Benazir was very pro-life. She fought for families. She fought for the right for a child to exist. Jacinda Ardern, famously, is very pro-death. She has campaigned actively for abortion up to birth. That is legal in New Zealand under specific circumstances. She also did not want to make any amendments to the Abortion Act that meant that a baby that was still inside a woman's stomach would be given pain relief. Now, cows have that, where we have to give pain relief to the calf. Why not people? These are just some of the ways where these two women were polar opposites. The one thing they did do was give birth in office. Jacinda is also assisted by a small army of helpers and a partner who is full-time with the child. Benazir and Jacinda are still different socially. Benazir is constantly photographed out with her family. She brought her family with her on multiple public outings and official outings. Jacinda's family are very, very rarely seen in public. The focus of a nuclear family seems very different for each of these ladies.
It ignores the fact that the foundation of a strong democracy includes trust in institutions, experts, and government, and that this can be built up over decades but torn down in mere years. It takes for granted that a strong democracy relies on debate and dialogue, and even the oldest regimes can seek to control these forums, and the youngest can seek to liberate them.
Jacinda, are you one of the youngest that are seeking to liberate the country? Or are you a fascist seeking to control it? I like that she uses the word regime, as she famously has been seen as the head of the International Socialist Youth going, comrade, 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 and now she's saying regime. She also talks about the youngest can liberate a regime, and the oldest are the ones that like to perpetuate them. Does anyone else see the comparison with how Jacinda likes to run a country? She does not like open dialogue. She does not like open debate. She is not a champion of freedom of speech, not even in the slightest. Trust is reciprocal. If you do not trust your people and you treat them as if they are not trustworthy and you talk down to them, how on earth should you demand trust and respect back? You ask for people to trust institutions that you believe in, yet you do not champion dialogue and debate between opposing voices in the same institutions. You cannot demand what you do not have to give, and that is exactly what Jacinda Ardern is doing when she is talking and campaigning for trust, but has none to give the citizens of New Zealand.
When facts are turned into fiction and fiction turned into fact, you stop debating ideas and you start debating conspiracy.
I have one response to that. Jacinda, what is a woman? If we need to debate ideas and we need to talk about fact and not conspiracy and not sit in ideological platforms, what are women? What does women's rights mean? If you can't answer that, we are only talking about your ideological conspiracy.
In the past 10 years, we have passed laws that include everything from the introduction of gay marriage and the banning of conversion therapy, right through to embedding a 1.5 degree climate change target into law, banning military-style semi-automatics and assault rifles, and the decriminalisation of abortion.
We have one of the most outrageous abortion laws in the world. And that's not my opinion, that is a fact. In the world, we have some of the loosest abortion regulations. But that seems like a weird thing to be your chariot to the people. Rather than I managed to encourage families, I managed to build children up. We've now got the lowest rate of child poverty. Your champion is that we managed to reduce the life of more babies than ever before. Now, the second thing there you had was climate change. Climate change is an interesting one, especially when you take into account that part of the climate change control here in New Zealand has been selling off prime farmland, turning them into carbon forest, which means forestry. And those are often owned by Russian forestry companies and international forestry companies. The regulatory system that was set up in place to protect prime farmland from being sold to these forestry companies has not prevented one large-scale international sale. The next point you had where you were talking about guns. However, as you toured America and as you loved to talk about gun control, the part that you so sweetly miss whenever you talk about the Christchurch massacre is where the police did not vet Brenton in full, in person, and they approved his purchase of 2,300 rounds of ammunition. If they had vetted him properly, they would have found that his references was a couple that he met online, a father and a son, that he had never met in person. That death could have been prevented if processes were followed, but they weren't. And what that meant is farmers and legal gun owners had their guns taken off them, and we now have the worst gun violence that we've ever seen in New Zealand's history. You didn't trust legal firearm owners, and what you got back in return was a huge increase in gun violence in our country.
Now, I will admit feeling some trepidation entering a discussion on how we strengthen our democracies, when this issue is so easily and wrongly distorted into being opposed to free speech. But that fear is overshadowed by a greater fear of what will happen to our democracies if we don't act to firm up our foundations.
Strengthening democracy means strengthening freedom of speech, not tightening regulations on it. And perhaps if she realised that the whole problem her democracy is falling apart is because she's not allowed free speech, she's not allowed debate and dialogue, she has kept such a tight control and restriction over the speech of our national media that people realise something is severely wrong and yet no one is allowed to discuss it. That is causing the breakdown of our democracy.
I was raised a Mormon.
This one's short, but I just find it an interesting fact. So she was raised, she believed and was raised as part of the Church of the Latter-day Saints. The first 5 prophets of the Latter-day Saints were all Freemasons. So she was raised to worship and obey Freemasons. Just an interesting fact.
Social media platforms were born offering the promise of connection and reconnection. But increasingly, we use it to do neither of those things. Now, I doubt anyone here has ever created a group titled Political Views I Disagree With but Choose to Enter into Respectful Dialogue With to Better Understand Alternative Perspectives.
Oh, It cracks me up so much because we all know that she has been the most restrictive person when it comes to her online presence in terms of not allowing people to talk, not allowing different opinions. That to say that she doubts anyone's ever created this farcical group is hilarious. When has she ever made the effort to meet with and understand different groups in New Zealand without trying to get them to fit her agenda? When does she ever just seek to understand before trying to implement her own policy? Most of the time, she doesn't even try and have open discussion before bringing out a new policy. She just makes it because it suits her. Jacinda is the queen. Honestly, she's phenomenal at navigating communication and navigating questions and never answering anything. That doesn't sound like a conversation to me. When I listen to her speak with others, it is not a conversation. She expertly maneuvers a conversation to get to the result that she wants. It's political vocabulary through and through, and she's very, very good at it.
The time has come for social media companies and other online providers to recognise their power and to act on it.
That's an interesting one. Recognise their power and act on it. So she knows that social media is a powerful tool. But the part she gets wrong is that she sees it as power for the company, not that it should be powerful for the people to be able to have this platform of open debate and dialogue and discussion. She sees it as a powerful thing that needs to be maneuvered and controlled and restricted, rather than opened up and more imaginative. That is important because she realizes that people having the power to say what they want when they want and talk about things really makes an impact and really matters. But to her, what matters more than you being able to say what you want is her being able to control what you say and do what she wants.
There's a term that gets thrown around a lot, keyboard warrior. It's used to refer to someone who makes aggressive or abusive posts online, often anonymously. Now, I like the name. In my mind, when it's written by a lone person unacquainted with personal hygiene practices, dressed in a poorly fitted superhero costume, one that is baggy in all the wrong places.
Nothing says kindness to me like a prime minister that bags out her own citizens. Especially not to international faculty and media. However, what she gets wrong is that Jacinda has this huge disconnect from the people. And the reason I can say this is because I've been on the ground amongst tens of thousands of everyday Kiwis for the last year. And I can tell you now, the people that are most passionate with their dislike of Jacinda is probably your grandparents, your little nana. They are the ones that are so vocal and so passionate and so angry about what she has done to our country that they're almost willing to get up in arms. Of course, they're not actually. They're probably just sitting there at their keyboard talking to Jacinda, sitting on her page. But that's where she goes wrong. It is not her perception, which is dirty, scoungy people in their pajamas. It's probably your nana who cooks a Sunday roast. Not someone dressed up as Spider-Man, someone who's sitting there with her wool and her knitting needles, and she is mad. And to be honest, rightly so.
Now, I do my own social media. I always have. After all, it is being described as the new town square. But we all know that it's more than just news and information being shared these days.
I do my own social media, Jacinda says. Does she? Does she really, or is she lying yet again? Now, the reason I can say she is lying, and pretty much hands down say she is lying, do you guys remember early on when the rollout started and she asked for any stories of people with injuries to come forward and comment? And she was flooded with tens of thousands of comments, and then miraculously, around 20,000 of them disappeared like that. So if she does do her own social media as she claims, she personally went and deleted or blocked every single one of them. So either she's lying or everyone that happened to just must never have actually commented at all. Again, it's another stepping stone of why she does not love free speech. And what happened after she heard those stories? She talks about open debate and dialogue and wanting to understand people. Did anyone feel understood after tens of thousands of messages to her? Or do they simply get swept under the rug and then all of a sudden their Facebook profiles got restricted? Doesn't seem like a champion of free speech and understanding to me.
Mainstream media have layers of accountabilities and journalistic expectation that others who also present information to us don't.
Nothing says layers of journalistic integrity by never talking about the stories that people are asking you to talk about and never digging into the facts. Has anyone seen a story from any mainstream media here in New Zealand about the money behind these massive pharmaceutical companies? Has anyone here seen any story about reactions that didn't end in it, but you need to get your second booster? Have you guys seen that? Has anyone seen a story that has really shown Jacinda for who she is and called her out on her blatant lying and then not soften the blow with second and third follow-up stories later on? She says that mainstream media are journalistic integrity, but yet she has also paid them hundreds of millions of dollars. If you really thought someone was the cornerstone of integrity, could you bribe them so easily?
What is important here is just not what our young people learn, but how. In a disinformation age, we need to learn how to analyse and critique information. Now, that doesn't mean teaching mistrust, but rather, as my old history teacher, Mr. Fountain, extolled, to quote, understand the limitations of a single piece of information, and that there is always a range of perspectives on events and decisions.
Mr. Fountain seems like he might understand that debate and dialogue and different perceptions is a healthy thing. I wonder what he would think about Jacinda's control on the media now. If anyone knows him, reach out. I'd just love to have a chat. He might think she's the champion and the queen of all people, in which case that's cool. I'm just openly curious. What she is talking about is teaching people to have critical thinking. But she doesn't say that word. Instead, she talks about mistrust. That's a funny thing. Because as I said earlier, trust is earned. Trust is built upon. But you can't just demand it and you can't expect it. I think we should all champion for people to be critical thinkers, to analyse situations, to go back and forward on data. But what that also requires is for all sides to be presented. You cannot find the facts if you don't know all perspectives of a situation. You'll only have your understanding based on your knowledge, and that is not healthy.
Yes, diversity of voice in mainstream media matters. The responsibility of social media matters. Teaching our kids to deal with disinformation and the role we play as leaders, it all matters.
I'm so excited that she believes diversity of opinion matters. Do you think we could register to be part of the media council? Do you think we should do that, guys? What do you reckon? If diversity of opinion matters, how many centre and centre-right voices have been cancelled and fired over the last 5 years? Diversity of opinion only matters to Jacinda when it's her version of diversity.
We are richer for our difference and poorer for our division. Through genuine debate and dialogue, through rebuilding trust and information and one another, through empathy, let us reclaim the space in between. After all, there are some things in this life that make the world feel small and connected. Let kindness be one of them.
It is appalling what Jacinda has done to our country in such a short amount of time. And to label it kindness instead of saying what it is, which is cruel, is completely disingenuous and just what I've come to expect from her. That's the end of the speech. This is the end of my reaction. I've got nothing to say except I'm disappointed she doesn't take ownership for her responsibility when it comes to caring for our country and looking after her citizens with genuine kindness.